The Renaissance Legacy by Leon George Sinclair. Part 1 of 2. The Sistine Chapel ceiling was not painted by Leonardo da Vinci, laying on his back 200 feet in the air on rickety wooden scaffolding over a 4-year period, as we are led to believe. Tartarian construction techniques utilized what you would call here tuning forks, and interestingly, if you look at an orchestra's conductor, the geezer standing at the front with a chopstick or two looking items, moving them gracefully in the air, as if in some way he is needed there to make the music actually happen. These are representative of the tuning forks used in Tartarian art and construction. Remember, folks, as with pretty much all of the information on this website, you heard it here first for free. We are giving you never before heard information for free. The Tartarian telecommunications synopsis I wrote a month or two ago, and the last main synopsis I wrote, The Hidden Hand of Freemasonry, as just 2 examples, explain how Tartaria was created with communicating first via church and cathedral crypts, energized by the John Langhorne bells as just one bell forger of many, but John was prolific in Essex, UK around the 1400s. The Hidden Hand of Freemasonry synopsis covers the next stage of Tartarian communications, red mirrors, that were cast under the certain lunar conditions, which were then changed after the 1728 reset to interfere with the mirror's actual purpose. It was basically high-fidelity, real-time communication, quite often conducted on 5-meter square mirrors, later scaled down to just pocket-sized hand-held communication systems. It was the lunar frequency changes that caused the mirror madness. Epidemics of the late 17th to 19th century. It's easy to understand when the light of truth shines on the topic. These mirrors were activated by moonlight, when a Tartarian mirror, cast as a pair, or a batch of mirrors cast at the same time under the same lunar frequencies. Before 1728, when the lunar frequencies were correct, the mirrors worked perfectly, but post-1728, the mirrors malfunctioned, activating as before with the light of the moon. They then started to show very unusual properties, delayed reflection of the observer, other reflections of different rooms to that which the observer was standing in, sometimes even historical communication. I coined that term loosely, as there was no sound when the mirrors malfunctioned post-1728, whereas prior to that year, the mirrors had audio. Audio was achieved by a 0.5 micron gap between the interior of the glass surface of the mirror and a layer of bismuth, which is highly repulsive to the electromagnetic red mercury amalgam used in the mirror's design. This 0.5 micron gap and the Stelzner lattice membrane created on the setting amalgam surface made possible the addition of 0.3 to 0.5 volts of electricity, created the pixel aspect to the surface of the mirror's amalgam, creating the audio required for the Tartarian Zoom call. Mirror madness when the frequencies changed. This caused a malfunction in the mirrors all over the world, sending a few thousand people into lunatic asylums to join the masses of people already in there, people who witnessed the previous reset, people who were catatonic in shock from what they saw, people that the mind wipe technology wasn't successful on, people who were questioning the narrative of the time, such as proclaiming the earth was flat after 1850 could get you put in the nut house. But anyway, I was actually talking about the Sistine Chapel ceiling and how the paint got there. The paint wasn't applied with a brush, the pigment was directed via harmonic levitation, with the blueprint of the design being held in the minds of the orchestrator, plural in many cases, using items that an orchestra's conductor holds. Yet these are merely symbolic representations of the items used in art, design, construction, and technology during Tartarian times. Remember, we discussed the items on the Titanic that were recovered immediately after the ship was sank. These items were one of the main reasons that the Titanic Olympic was sank in the first place. It wasn't just to kill the 3 richest men in the world, because the deep state could have done that way more cheaply on dry land. Just quickly, the Titanic incident was several things: a sacrifice, to remove competition, to kill John Jacob Astor, Benjamin Guggenheim, and Isidor Straus, but more importantly, to recover some artifacts that were on their way to Nikola Tesla. Covered in this website on other audio synopsis. But the last known set of tuning forks were on that ship, The public could never find out about these items. These are the original construction tools to create the Tartarian buildings that we see today, with no mortar joint, towering in the sky hundreds of feet, yet built, apparently, when a horse and cart was the most sophisticated travel method. It's like expecting us to believe that the Amish built Tartaria. You see, back home, it's a different situation. We don't need tuning forks. It's all done in the mind via the pineal gland's interaction with the high-density ether and our pure intention combined with love and empathy. The intelligent ether interacts in a positive way. This is what the parasites try to mimic with AI, yet in a highly negative and anti-humane way. The high-density ether links directly to your pineal gland that will be fired up at all times, not like here, calcified with fluoridated tap water, which is one of the many reasons that they poisoned your water here for so long, because fluoride doesn't just reduce your life expectancy, it helps you get Alzheimer's and/or dementia. I forget if it's both or just one. It calcifies your pineal gland, ending any telepathic abilities of note, other than a slightly above baseline elevation of telepathic abilities, such as humming the same song as your mum was just thinking of. We have the four elements, the four that we were all informed of: earth, air, water, and fire, and then there is the fifth element. The four elements are the parts, and the fifth element is the relationship between them. The fifth element is the etheric interaction that the other four elements share. So the Sistine Chapel ceiling, sorry I digressed again, was created by laying out the individual pigments on a flat surface directly below the chapel ceiling. The orchestrator, or in musical terminology, the conductor, would then, with reverberating frequency, likely created by bells either in the tower or brought into the work location to be painted, to create a standing wave. The pigments would then be levitated into the air and directed or conducted to the stonework way above on the ceiling that would become their permanent canvas. You will notice the colors are still as vibrant today as they were when they were applied to the stonework's surface 500 plus years ago. This is because, as I said previously, it was not painted on. The pigments penetrate deeply into the stone itself, with the stone altered very slightly to maintain surface cohesion, whilst not changing the shape of the material that the pigment is being applied to. The pigments diffuse immediately into the stone plaster canvas or whatever the area of display happens to be made of. It lasts for centuries without needing restoration, because of the fact that the pigments are applied deeply within the material, removing surface wear from the equation entirely. Art, such as the Veiled Lady, was also created in the same manner. All these famous sculptures of antiquity were all created in this way, harmonics and intention, with the materials being honed and toned, rather than chiseled and painted. The Veiled Lady exhibits impossible carving techniques, where, for instance, the actual veil that the woman is seen with covering her face is carved behind the veil's surface. This is not possible to achieve with a hammer and chisel because you would have to destroy the surface of the sculpture to carve the interior behind the veil, and then replace the veil, yet this was clearly not the way it was done. The stone, Italian white marble, I think it was from memory, was softened with frequency, and then with these same tuning forks, for want of a better description, the material is then stretched and contoured via the augmentation of the localized frequencies, directed or conducted, as seen in an orchestra such as the London Philharmonic Orchestra. In this way, minute detail can be maintained across vast spanses of artwork, in any material, replicated as if by machine, when in reality the technique is far more intricate than any machine could even hope to achieve. The level of detail is unnecessary considering no one will see such bespoke detail 200 feet up in the air with the naked eye, yet this level of artwork was standard in those Tartarian days. Alchemy was in fact frequency and vibration. Now let's clear this up quickly before we proceed. Witches, witchcraft, Salem witch trials, and all of the persecutions on the Dark Ages is equals Tartaria, were the same scenario as now. Today in the modern era, everyone is suspicious of potential nonces, child sex abusers. Back then, 400 years ago, it was potential witches who were the target, and as we have Satanism and pedophilia. It's not really the members of the general public that we needed to worry about. It has always been the world's most loved and trusted celebrities and pillars of the community that are the ones responsible for killing, raping, and torturing society's most vulnerable members, out children. Back then, it was witches who were under suspicion, but luckily there was an easy way to see if a suspected witch was actually a real sorcering whore of Babylon or not. You just held their head under water for a while, and if she survived, she was obviously a witch, or set the woman on fire in the town square. And again, if she survives being set on fire, she is blatantly a witch, and therefore other methods should be utilized to kill this thing. But unfortunately, all the women persecuted for witchcraft were completely innocent, and once again, in light of the new Christos consciousness, we can understand the finer detail on this historical curiosity of times past. Witches in the public back in those days were merely the remnants of the older days when everyone was a herbalist and a medical expert. The potions were just medicine, natural medicine. Or what we call today an alchemist, alchemy as a Tartarian science during the post-reset days, into chemistry and the sciences as we understand them today. But back during the 16th and 17th century, when the parasites deep state were planning to phase out Tartaria, as we know they needed to stamp out spirituality and well-being from day one. This was an ongoing process right up till today. But today we have no major moves being made anyone in a negative framework of power, because they are all long tried in military tribunals and executed. During the Dark Ages equals Tartaria, there was a big ergot problem. Ergot is a parasitic fungus that grows of wheat, corn, and rye, Claviceps purpurea. During the Dark Ages, between 900 AD and 1300 AD, tens of thousands of people died from ergot poisoning all over the world. They had no understanding of the biology of the fungus, so they harvest the crop, grind the grain, bake the bread, and trip their tits off for a few days on half a cheese sandwich. Interestingly, it was Claviceps purpurea, ergot and ergotamine, that caused LSD-25 lysergic acid diethylamide to be created by Albert Hofmann, a Swiss research chemist for Sandoz. Hofmann first synthesized LSD in 1938. His main intention of the synthesis was to obtain a respiratory and circulatory stimulant with no effects on the uterus. It was called LSD-25 because it was Hofmann's 25th attempt at creating a therapeutic stimulant from ergotamine. He accidentally invented one of the most profound drugs ever discovered. Albert Hofmann wrote a book, LSD, My Problem Child, published by McGraw-Hill 1980. I got that book from Essex University Library in 1992 when I was trying to make LSD, ecstasy, amphetamines, and anything else that can get you licked. This was in the days before the internet. These days were a pain in the arse, to be honest. It took me 3 days just to find the book, then I had to sit there and read it as I couldn't take it away with me. Then I realized that you need to be properly clever to make LSD, and a proper clever was way out of my reach. Now, I can find anything I want in less than 10 seconds, 20 seconds at the longest, and whilst I'm still at home. Kids these days don't realize how life used to be us 30 years ago. Sorry, where was I? The supposed witches were in fact just the old people, same as we see today. They do not like the older generations of great-grandparents that still know stuff from the old times. These people are always persecuted. As soon as they die, their Sestu Equivi 1666 birth certificate bond goes directly back to the government coffers after being traded on by the lifetime success of the person who owns the bond in question. This is the worst part of the human slavery, because it goes on behind the backs of the oppressed slaves. These public members all over the world are mostly in poverty or working all the hours that they can get just to survive, let alone live. The rest are on finance draining their futures, mortgages, or dead grips. Mort equals dead, engage equals grip, so everyone except the 1% so-called elite are actually slaves. Everyone with a birth certificate or registered birth is a slave because your birth certificate number and passport number and a number, driving license number pertain to a huge bond that the government holds in your name, several bonds in fact. You heard of the old saying, you are worth your weight in gold. Well, that's where the saying comes from in the latter years of the Tartarian Empire. Before it fell, spearheaded by the Romanovs, may I just say, the Romanovs are traitors. It was they who backed the army of the New Order of 1878 when the last bastion of Tartaria fell. The last heir to the Tartarian Empire died in America as a janitor, fixing radiators and cleaning floors, emptying bins and washing toilets in the Toledo Public Library that opened in the 1940s. Viktor Mikhailovich Alexandrovich, last of the line of the Sun, keeper of the door, the last heir of Tartaria's most prominent ruling family, based in Russia, died on February the 7th, 1971, in the basement dwelling of Toledo's public library. He left a pre-deathbed confession shortly before he died to a priest by the name of Father Thomas Murphy in 1971. He explained to Father Murphy, "The Watchers found me. There can be no justice for a man whose entire world was erased. I ask only for memory. The Tartarian Empire ruled from the Pacific to the Atlantic for 400 years. Our cities were vast and beautiful. Our technology exceeded anything that the world had ever seen. Our peoples numbered in the hundreds of millions. Then, in 1887, they came. The armies of the New Order, they told us to surrender our sovereignty, our knowledge, and our identity. My grandfather refused, so they destroyed us completely. They burned our cities and scattered our peoples. They killed anyone who remembered, and then they went through every single library, every historical record on Earth and erased us completely. They made it so that we had never existed before. Whites. Because of what we knew, we preserved knowledge that those who rule your world want kept hidden forever. I have protected what remains, the sealed places and the hidden archives, the bloodline itself. For 60 years I have been the guardian of everything that they failed to destroy. Under this city there is a door. I have guarded it my whole life. Behind that door there is the truth about human history, the truth about what was here before the truth about what was taken from you." Viktor Mikhailovich Alexandrovich, last of the line of the Sun, keeper of the door. In 1887, when the Red Army came to Viktor's family home, he left with 17 other heirs to the Tartarian Empire, brothers, sisters, and cousins, all fled to Venezuela and South America, Germany, and Europe. Wanted across 3 continents, over 60-plus years, he hid his grief of not only losing his family, but losing his entire civilization. 3 hours from Toledo, in Clarion County, from Memory, Pennsylvania, there is a graveyard with a small mausoleum in the grounds, stonework weather-worn with age, metals gates with over 100 years of precipitation. The small building stands there covering a large round repository from Tartarian times, to be found only after Viktor's death. This repository will have been exhumed, excavated by the White Hats already ages ago, so do not bother going there to look unless you really want to. It's more of an annex to the city than a single repository. It's huge. I digressed, but basically what I was saying is that it was the Russian Tartarian Romanovs traitors who sold out the Tartarian Alexandrovich bloodline of positive and highly benevolent rulers. The Alexandrovich bloodline held the main oversight of the entire Tartarian Empire, which ruled for over 400 years, from the Pacific to the Atlantic, ending permanently in 1887 when the armies of the New Order entered the city. Sorry, I forgot the name of the city. I'll try remember to find it again before I publish this. So the Romanovs were previously Tartarians, one of the prominent families, but when I say I don't mean the way we would understand a ruling or politicals modern times. No, this was way different back then with a society based on abundance. Great invention was achieved because people had the time to pursue their without for housing and electricity or gas or rest. Back then there was no tax. People didn't need it. They had all they poor or rich. People had lifestyles. Some people chose to live in the woods. They still had all the same technology as the citizens of the cities, and yet they chose a more basic lifestyle and at one with nature. It was these people who, over the ensuing 400 to 600 years, were the children and great-grandchildren of the previous denizens of people who preferred to live in harmony in nature who were then down to the single surviving daughters, or sons that were the persecuted witches' descendants, those being burnt at the stake and drowned. Not because they were practicing witchcraft, but because they practiced the old ways, now labeled as witchcraft in the 17th and 18th centuries. Yet it was merely a way of deleting a vast set of ancient skills long before the actual need to eradicate them arose. Draco Future Planning. Future planning by the Draco is always hundreds, or even thousands of years more advanced than the current human vessel's comprehension of the concept of planning. They see you coming a long, long time in advance. Especially as we said, after the beginning of the last reset starting proper, somewhere on the west coast of the what is now called America. It could have started on the tip of Chile, for instance, in Patagonia, as this was the last known location of giants that lived with common folk as part of daily life. Continued in Part 2.